All right. Thank you for joining us, the Break the Norm leadership team, for our December Lunch and Learn. Today, we are talking about how to develop a leadership program in your organization. And we're going to go through some tips and give some strategies and also tell you a little bit about what people and organizations tend to get wrong when launching development programs. I probably been doing this kind of work for, I'll say, about 20 years, working with adults before I was a middle school history teacher. But since then, I've been working with adults to develop their work skills and working with organizations to develop leaders progressively. Now, my name is Dr. Ramian Pierre. Please call me Ramian. And my colleague, Rachel Sadoff, are going to be talking today. And typically, I interview a subject matter expert and pull out their wisdom that we then share with you. I've asked Rachel to play along with me today, and we're going to switch roles. So I'm going to be the subject matter expert today, and Rachel is going to ask me questions that I carefully scripted out for her in detail to ask me. Correct, Rachel?
Yes.
All right, fair. So with that, Rachel, why don't you take it away with the first question that you have come up with, please?
Awesome. So, developing a leadership program begins with a clear understanding of existing and the current state of leadership challenges. So, the question today is, what type of leadership challenges might organizations face?
Yeah, what an insightful, thoughtful, and brilliant question, Rachel. You are clearly a marvel. So yes, all jokes aside, the first thing let me say about doing this analysis to try to understand what the organization needs before you fulfill that need with a leadership development program, the most important thing is to spend enough time here on this step. I recall working with some engineers who were also project managers, and they taught me a lesson that I thought was invaluable. They looked at projects that were behind schedule or over budget. And one of the things that they found is that most of those projects didn't spend enough time in this early phase of developing the requirements for the solution or even defining the problem. And what their data showed is that to do this well, you need to really spend about 20% of your time slash money budget on defining the problem so you know what you're trying to solve for and coming up with the requirements for the solution so that you know that the solution you've finally settled on actually meets the needs. So if you have 6 months and $10,000 to create a leadership development program for your organization, plan on spending a little bit more than a month and 20% of your money, actually money and time, trying to figure out exactly what the program will address and what the solution needs to be. So that said, after you spend your 20%, as you're spending 20% of your time, what you're really trying to do is to do a gap analysis. You're trying to see, all right, what is the current state and what do we want the future state to be? And what's the gap between those two things? And because then the solution will address that gap. It'll move you more from your current state closer towards your future state. Maybe not all the way there, but at least get you closer. So the types of challenges I see over and over and over again, there are three big ones I see with organizations where there's number one, some sort of knowledge skill gap where leaders perhaps don't know how to do something. Or, which I think I probably see a little bit more commonly, is some managers know some leaders know what to do, but all of them don't. And so the skill is implemented inconsistently. Maybe Rachel's a rock star at it, but I'm just like a C student at it. So knowledge skill gaps or inconsistent implementation of knowledge skills among leaders is the number one challenge I see. The number two challenge has to do with some sort of interpersonal skill gap, where you want leaders behaving like this, but they're only behaving like this. And so that might be something around communication or feedback, basically emotional intelligence type topics. So that's the second area. The third and sort of final of the big buckets of challenges I see organizations have over and over again have to do with the lack of effective problem solving skills among leaders. Like maybe they don't have effective strategic thinking or enough business acumen. So those are the three buckets: knowledge skill gaps or inconsistent implementation of knowledge skills, interpersonal skill gaps, or problem-solving ability gaps. Those are the three types of challenges, Rachel, I see organizations have that they want to have addressed by their leadership development program.
Yeah, definitely. And just to like top onto the problem solving thing, I also think like teaching people how to make decisions
Mm,
goes into that like problem solving piece of it,
yeah.
because sometimes we're, trying to figure out the problem, but the problem is that we're not able to make decisions.
No, you're absolutely right. And you can teach people like different frameworks for how to make decisions, how they might make decisions. What I've seen is that just teaching them that in the classroom alone doesn't work. You have to find a way of helping them apply it on the job. So after you teach them in the classroom, then you need to find some way, usually through some sort of mentorship or coaching component of the program, to have them do it while they're back on the job. We'll talk
Absolutely.
more about that in a little bit.
Absolutely. So, how does knowing the challenges influence the design of a leadership program?
Yes. So it's I mentioned three buckets: knowledge skill gaps, interpersonal skill gaps, and problem solving gaps. Once you know which of those three types of gaps exist in your organization, that will point you directly towards a strategy that you should use. For every kind of gap, there's a strategy. We're going to talk about those in detail in a second. One of the things, but this gives me a chance to mention one of the things I see over and over again, many organizations want training to solve all of their gap problems. Even if it's a behavior problem or like an application of a skill problem, they want to have their leaders take a course or do a workshop. And that doesn't always work because what in the research I've seen, only 10 to 34% of what is taught in a workshop or training course is ever actually applied on the job unless there's a way to monitor what people are doing, a way of supporting what they're doing back on the job, and a way of reinforcing what they're doing back on the job. So once you know the type of challenge, it becomes easier to figure out what strategy you want to use, basically how you want to build your program.
Yeah, yeah. Can you provide an example of like a common leadership challenge that organizations face?
Yeah. A common one is organizations face difficulty in preparing their high potential employees, your individual contributors, for leadership roles, becoming people leaders. And I don't know if you remember, I think it was two, maybe even three lunch and learns ago, we talked about the four A's for corporate success: ability, attitude, alliances, and assignments. One of the great things is that different types of leadership programs address each one of those four A's. For example, if I have a leadership development program that is based in training, it's going to be able to address ability and attitude. Giving people the skills they need to do the job, and in terms of their attitude, sort of improving their confidence with their ability, confidence in their ability to do the job. Um, Mentoring, coaching based leadership development programs, those work on attitude and alliances. Again, helps build confidence, helps change sort of mindsets, as well as mentoring coaching programs tend to help you develop a network, either with your mentor or coach, or sometimes if it's group coaching, you can actually develop relationships with your peers within the organization. And then lastly, the one of the big strategies I see with leadership development programs are ones that are based in experiential learning or that are project based. And those types of programs help with alliances and assignments that give you the skills you need to move further, as well as the visibility you need to move further in an organization. So again, you take this common challenge, preparing high potential employees, and the different types of training programs you might use will each impact a different set of the four A's. Does that make any sense?
Absolutely. And just to kind of put in a plug, if you missed that lunch and learn with the four A's, you can go back and watch it. If you go to breakthenormleadership.com/LNL, all of our past lunch and learns are there as well as like the handouts that go with it. So if you want to go deeper into what Dr. Pierre is talking about with the 4 A's, there is a whole, I believe it was our September Lunch and Learn
That's right,
that
it was.
focused exclusively, the whole hour was focused on that.
The four
So
A's, correct.
I just kind of want to give people that plug that that reference is available for them.
Good call, Rachel. Thank you.
Yeah. So key leadership style competencies are essential for aligning development efforts with organizational goals.
Yeah.
Why is identifying these competencies crucial, and how might they vary across different organizations?
All right. I love competencies, and for any of you developing leadership programs, you are going to love competencies too if you do not already. So, a competency is literally a business concept and a definition for that concept. And the value of clarifying what competencies your program is going to address is that it sets a clear target. Well, actually, even before that, it puts everyone literally on the same page. So, for example, if I said I want my leadership program to improve the respect that leaders demonstrate, I want it to improve their business acumen, and I want it to improve their strategic thinking, the definition I have for those three things may be different from the definition you have, Rachel, and the definitions that everyone in my organization has. So, competencies help bring us all on the same page that we're talking about the same thing because it defines the concept, business acumen or respect, very clearly so that we know what our target is, which is the second thing competencies do. Besides putting us on the same page, they help us set a target. All right, I need people to be respectful. This is what we mean by respect. This is what we mean by inclusive. This is what we mean by business acumen, whatever the competency is. So it helps us know what we're aiming for. Now, depending on your business, your industry, even your strategic goals, you might have a different combination of competencies that are important to your organization. For example, if you're an organization that works directly with the public, you may have a number of sort of like public-facing customer service type competencies that are important, like giving people respect, managing complaints, things like that. Whereas if your business is very internal or maybe a B2B, business to business type organization, your competency recipe or mix might be a little bit different.
Great, great. So how can organizations craft well-defined competencies?
Yeah, it's definitely a skill. I'm going to admit it's not a skill I'm great at. I can tailor a competency, but developing them from scratch is really tricky. So I suggest you do what I do, which is steal shamelessly from very smart people. And my favorite two places to go for competency definitions are the US federal government's Office of Personnel Management, OPM, their executive core qualifications. I know it was a whole long sentence. um, Office of Personnel Management Executive Core Qualifications. If you Google that, you'll get to their list of competencies, and they are some very smart, very hardworking people define these things really, really well. I encourage you to steal from them and tailor for your organization. The other place where I find really good competency definitions, particularly for what I call interpersonal skills, but some people used to call soft skills, or maybe still call soft skills, is the Gallup. They changed the name. It used to be Strengths Finder, but now it's the Gallup Clifton Strengths. The list of all those strengths with the definitions is a great resource that makes it easier just to tailor things. So, bottom line, steal from smart people. That's how you get well-crafted competencies. Just tailor them for your organization.
Awesome. And in our follow-up email, as well as our one pager, we'll include these two locations where you all can go and find some of these resources.
Good call. Good call.
So after identifying competencies and before selecting a leadership development strategy, it's important to do a leadership gap analysis. So how does the gap analysis shape the eventual leadership development program?
Yeah, it helps. Good question. It helps you decide sort of what parts of the program might be more important and need to take up more bandwidth in terms of time, energy, money, staffing than other parts. So I've talked already about three different types of program strategies. Strat Basing your program on training, basing your program on mentoring or coaching, or basing your program on experiential learning or projects. If your gap analysis tells you, okay, what our leaders, their biggest challenge is skill development. And then after that, it's really it's more of the interpersonal skills. And then after that, it's really problem solving. Then you'll probably have a program that focuses mostly on like number one on training, then like secondarily on the interpersonal skills, and then lastly on the problem solving skills. But if your gaps analysis shows something different, like maybe all your folks know the right thing to do, they're just not doing it when they're supposed to, then you'll probably have an interpersonal skill based program or a program that's more interpersonal based than anything else. So it just your gap analysis will help you figure out what's the right mix because I have very rarely seen an organization that develops an effective leadership program that has only one note, right? It's always usually some sort of mix of training, experience, and interpersonal, like to make a nice chord that works for the organization. Yeah. So the gap analysis will help you tell you what parts of the program should be bigger and which parts of the program should be smaller.
Absolutely. So, what methods can be effective in conducting that gap analysis?
Yeah, you want to talk to people. So you want to you could do some broad things like you could look do a survey of all of your employees or particularly your current leaders. One of my favorite questions to ask in that type of analysis is asking um, folks within the organization, what are some of your chief complaints about leaders or leadership here? The reason why I like that question is because I'm one of those people who believes that behind every complaint is something that the person cares about. So it helps you understand what they think is really important if you sort of look behind the complaint. So surveys is one way. You could have your HR department do an analysis of performance reviews to see, according to that process, what types of gaps exist within the organization in terms of skills, technical skills, interpersonal skills, or problem solving. You could also use assessments to to sort of get a sense of what gaps exist within the organization. And by assessments, I mean things like using the Gallup Clifton Strengths assessment with all of your employees or with a sample of your employees, or using the emotional quotient inventory, the EQI 2.0 with your employees to see what they do well and what they do not so well, their areas for development. So typically surveys, performance reviews, assessments, and then there's conversations, just talking with leaders about what things they're not doing well and where they wish they had more development, more skills, more training, more abilities. That might be a really good way to figure out in the gap analysis what things in the organization need the most help and should be sort of front and center with any leadership development program.
Awesome. Awesome. So, after identifying leadership needs using this gap analysis, you'll want to select an appropriate leadership development strategy. So, what factors should be considered when choosing a leadership development strategy?
Yep. So what you want to do is match the appropriate gap type to the appropriate strategy. And I've been talking about three already. So let me pull it all together so that's super clear. So the three strategies or the three sort of flavors of leadership development programs that I see over and over and over again are training-based programs, mentoring and coaching based programs, and experiential project based programs. Now, what I've seen is that often organizations will sort of wrap all three of those into one program, but one of those elements might be bigger than the others. And so what each of those different types of strategies has strengths, weaknesses, and things you need to keep in mind. Let's start with training programs, then we'll do the other two. So with training programs, they are good for instilling new skills in your leaders. Your leaders didn't know, but now they know after going through the program. Or, as I said earlier, if there's just inconsistent application of skills, if Rachel does great feedback with her team members, but I don't do great feedback with my direct reports, and that's typical in my organization, and you want to standardize it to make sure that we're all doing at least the minimum or above, then a training program might be a good way of standardizing that behavior across all of your leaders. Now, training programs are not particularly good for interpersonal skills for the reasons I mentioned earlier, that you need to reinforce what happens in the training to make sure that it's applied later. And there are better ways of teaching people behaviors or attitudes than just giving them a training program. The other thing that people need to consider when implementing training programs is every training program needs some support, reinforcement, or monitoring afterwards. For example, Rachel, you could send me to a full day workshop on effective communication or on how to give good feedback or how to coach employees, but I am not likely to apply that back on the job unless there are ways for you or my organization to track what I do, to observe, like track my actual behaviors, to reinforce my those behaviors that they want. Tell me like, got it right, Ramian, you get a point today, um, or to reinforce what I should be doing. So sending out reminders via email, mentioning it during team meetings that we're all trying to, our goal this month is for all of us to behave in this way. Like things like that are the only way that training programs actually make a lasting impact more than a few days after the training. So that's a big thing that most organizations fail to do it entirely.
Well, it's developing new habits for people. And I think
Exactly.
that's a lot why organizations get so frustrated when they spend all this money to send somebody to a conference
Yeah.
and they're like, oh, we have nothing to show for it.
Right. And people think habits form just like that. Or they will say it's a commonly misquoted fact that it takes 21 days to form a habit. But I looked up the research on this and it takes, I might get these numbers wrong. On average, it takes 67 days to form a habit, with 8 days being the shortest and 256 days being the longest. This is all from the same study where people got 21 days. And it really just depends on how complex the habit is, how much the person is rewarded or monitored doing the habit after they've learned it. But let's assume on average, it takes 67 days, more than 2 months for anyone to form a habit. So if you think you can give someone a 2 hour training on cybersecurity, for example, and then have them make that a habit going forward, you're really fooling yourself. It takes a lot more time, energy, and money to make training programs work than many people think.
Well, yeah, it's like losing weight. Like it's fun the first couple days. And then
Yes.
after that, it's not so fun anymore.
No, and
And
I
you
pick
can have
cybersecurity.
that brownie, it's not fun anymore.
It is not. It is not. And we don't make and while learning new things can be fun, it still is hard. So that's number one, training programs. Number two, mentoring and coaching programs. I really like these because these get at the types of things that many organizations want. They want their leaders behaving in a certain way. So a mentoring and coaching based program is a great way to do that because they're very good for teaching and developing interpersonal skills. They're also really good for career planning. If you want your individual contributors to think about how they might fit into your organization and to stay around, a mentoring or coaching program is a great way for you to make space and facilitate that type of learning, that type of development. Now, mentoring and coaching programs are not good for technical skills, with one exception, but that most organizations don't use. If you're doing side by side coaching, where, for example, Rachel, if you want to teach me how to use Microsoft Outlook more effectively, and you sit right next to me while I'm working, and you coach me on here are the keystrokes you use, Ramian. Here's a better way of setting up your Windows or your desktop. Like that side by side coaching is a great way of teaching technical skills, but it's not usually what we mean by coaching. By coaching, we're talking about executive coaching, maybe group coaching, right? Um,
So it's kind
so
of the difference between consulting and like coaching, because I think people use them
ah,
interchangeably sometimes. But when I think of consulting, I think of more of giving somebody like a technical skill, whereas coaching is really the belief or understanding that the person has the right solution for them within themselves.
huh,
The coach's job is to help
yes,
draw that out, but then also giving them that accountability. But
yeah,
accountability, again, comes in different forms. Like if I'm not very emotionally intelligent, I'm not going to hold myself very accountable to what I discuss in my coaching sessions, right?
yeah.
Versus if it's a technical skill, like the numbers are going to show itself because it's either going to work or it's not.
Oh yeah, which actually you bring up another point there about like technical training. Part of the reason why I think many organizations lean towards training as leadership development is that it's easy to measure. Like you can have people take quizzes or take tests, um, and that's just easy to assess. Whereas mentoring and coaching, you really have to watch somebody, and most of us don't have time or bandwidth to watch other people at work because we're doing our own job. So you're right. So people sort of measure organizations tend to measure what is easy and lean towards delivering that as opposed to measuring what is most effective and delivering that.
Absolutely. And let's
So
hope
let
people are good at taking tests.
me, many people are, I am not. Mentoring and coaching programs. So like they're good, like I said, good for interpersonal skill development or career planning. They're not good for technical skills. They're not good for standardizing things across many people. And the other considerations organizations need to be aware of is that mentoring and coaching programs are very resource heavy. Many times coaching and mentoring is done one-on-one. So that's a huge commitment for both the mentor and the mentee, or the coach or the coachee. And that time is money because they're not doing anything else other than working with each other during their allotted time. The other consideration that many organizations should consider, particularly around mentoring, whether they call it mentoring or sponsoring, is that it is often not equitable within organizations. For example, research has shown that women, people of color, are less likely to have like mentors in the wings or sponsors in the wings ready to step in and help them. So if you're thinking about using a mentoring or coaching program, or developing one, you as the program manager or lead may need to spend a lot of time identifying potential mentors to help your program participants. And that's related to like the last sort of consideration you should have for these types of programs, which is unless you're hiring professional coaches who've been certified, trained by, say, the International Coaching Federation, you might have to teach I'm making this up, your senior executives how to be effective mentors for your individual contributors. There often is no one's born, sorry, very few people are born knowing how to mentor others. So you might have to have a development program for the people who are helping you develop the leaders within your organization. So it could be a huge commitment because you have the program with your individual contributors to help develop into leaders that you want to implement, but you may need to have a pre-program for the mentors to make sure that they're ready to help the people in your program. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Now, the last of the three different strategies for developing leadership programs that I see over and over again, there are more, but these are the big three, are experiential and project-based programs. Now, they are good for developing a network. So, for example, if I'm in a leadership program where the 20 participants in the program are divided into 4 groups of 5 to work on projects, I'm going to develop a really close working relationship with the other 4 people in my group. And if we're given sort of like a senior leader to be our advisor, we will all probably develop a great relationship with that senior advisor. That's the alliances part of corporate success that these types of programs really help with. Now, experiential and project-based programs are not good for delivering basic knowledge or theoretical knowledge. They're good for how to apply the knowledge that you already have in real life business situations, or to develop a particular mindset in a real life business situation. They're great at developing business acumen in general. The biggest consideration that organizations need to keep in mind with these types of programs is that they are very resource heavy. Because while me and the rest of my group of 5 are working on this project, we are not doing our regular full-time jobs. So there needs to be enough capacity with the organization to handle these projects. Or what you're doing is asking us to work sort of off hours, and that could also be really taxing on individual employees. You're going to have to make a decision. But they tend to be resource heavy. So those are the 3 different programs, or types of programs: training programs, mentoring and coaching programs, and experiential project-based programs. And I just talked through very quickly there the strengths, the weaknesses, and the considerations for each one.
Awesome. So could you explain the benefits and challenges of a particular development strategy?
Yeah, I'll speak to one, and I'll keep it a little bit anonymous, of of a training program that we helped develop for a large US based pharmaceutical company that operates in the US and internationally. And they wanted to develop a leadership development program for their, I'm trying to think of the best way to describe it, not their senior executives, but folks who they want to prepare for senior executive leadership. So they wanted there to be a mix of a number of different things. So we created a program that had a lot of mentoring and coaching because they wanted to keep these folks around for a long time in the organization. And I believe, I can't recall, I think there was even a little bit of project-based learning. So one of the things that we did was we really leaned into this mentoring coaching piece in a couple of different ways. We developed three different types of coaching. They're like sort of the standard individual one-on-one coaching. So Rachel, if you were my coach, we would meet monthly for, I think the program lasted 6 months. So we would meet 6 times over the course of the entire program. There was also group coaching where me and I think it was about 6 other program participants, we would have a coach who would work with us 3 times, so every other month during the course of the program. And those sessions were always focused around a particular business need, developing business acumen, developing strategic planning, developing financial acumen. And there was a little bit of pre-reading before that session. Could have been an article or I can't think of my words right now, or a video or a podcast episode. So we did a little pre-work, and then we'd come into the group coaching session. The coach would sort of frame, here are the challenges around this type of activity, this type of competency. So not a full lecture, but like a mini lecture of maybe like 10 minutes or so. And then we would do scenario work with these employees. So we would give them a series of scenarios and they would have to figure out how should we address this scenario based on what we read and what we discussed earlier. And the power of that group coaching is that if you and I were in the same group, we would help each other out. So we're developing a peer network, and I'm pulling on not only my wisdom from the reading and my experience, I'm pulling on your wisdom, the person next to you's wisdom. I'm pulling on the wisdom of the whole crowd that's in my group, as well as all of their experiences, all of their insights into the reading. So we're smarter together. The last part of the coaching program it was basically a form of squad coaching where we had an executive coach, the program participant, let's say it's me, my supervisor, and a senior executive who was committed to being my sponsor after the program is over. So the four of us would all gather and we would have 2 meetings. In the first meeting, my coach has worked with me individually and they've helped me figure out how to express what are the types of things that I like to do. Where do I want my career to go at this organization? What type of work do I want? And so that first session is really me talking to my supervisor and me talking to my sponsor about what kind of career do I want? Just making sure they have a clear picture of what I want. Then we all go away. And a month later, we all get back together again. And the coach this time helps my supervisor and my sponsor tell me how they're going to help me get to where I want to go within this organization. Because they probably know potential stretch assignments or people that I should know, or maybe promotions I should go for, or offices I should move into. And we found that that was a really great way of taking the wisdom of the senior leaders and sharing it downstream with the people who are in the program. So that was the core of the program, this 3-part coaching piece, which we found really helpful and impactful. Now, the challenge, which won't surprise you from what I said earlier, is that the that the sponsor and even the supervisors weren't quite comfortable giving me career advice because that wasn't what they normally did. Like my supervisor was very good at telling me how well I was doing my job, giving me feedback, keeping the trains running. But all supervisors aren't interested in, or take it back. All supervisors aren't equipped to help their direct reports plan their career. So what we had to learn in this program, as I pointed out earlier, is we had to learn how to teach corporate sponsors and supervisors how to help their direct reports career plan. So we had to sort of run a mini training program in advance of the main training program. Um, And the other challenge, as I pointed out earlier, is that what we found is that the women and people of color that were in the program didn't have sponsors just waiting in the wings. And the program staff had to use a lot of their own personal capital to find people in the organization who were willing to be sponsors, mentors for these employees who were high performing but were strangers to them. So those are the two big challenges that we had running this program. It was incredibly successful, though, I will say. Client was very pleased about the results, and I think we're about to launch our third iteration of this 6-month program that it went so well. But it wasn't without challenges, as I've talked about.
Can you, just for the sake of clarity, you talked about personal capital or social capital. Can
Yeah.
you just define it a little bit so that we know that everybody is aware of that term?
Yeah, good question. So I'll define it. So social capital is sort of like the goodwill that I've built up within this organization. So to be specific, in this case, what literally happened is the program manager would send emails. The program manager had been at the organization, I think, for 20 plus years, and she sent emails, made phone calls to as many senior leaders as she could and say, hey, look, we need your support for this program. I have a person who's great, high performing. They're in this program because they deserve to be, but they don't have someone who's willing to be their sponsor. Would you be willing to be their sponsor? I will personally vouch for them. And that was happening for not just like one or two people, but for like 20 people who were all women and people of color. So that's what I mean by personal capital is I was using my word, my reputation to help this person who's at the senior leadership be willing to help this great high performing employee who's a stranger to them.
Yeah,
Is
and
that
I think
better?
that's so important to think about or know about, because so many times when we think of leadership, we don't think of our personal influence or our social capital as valuable as that is. We don't always think about that as something, as a leadership tool or something that we're using.
That's a really good point, Rachel. So if I could give another piece of advice then that I hadn't thought of before is if you're developing a development program within your organization, you want your program manager to have a good amount of social capital and a good reputation with the organization, and or you want to have some sort of champion, some senior leader, some very well-respected person within the organization who could make those phone calls or send those emails. So you want somebody who's running the program to have enough social capital to get you through the sticking points as you're executing the program. Good
Yeah, I
call.
think it kind of goes back to the lunch and learn that we did, I think it was last month, about influencing without authority, because a lot of times when you're executing a program like this, you don't have like a ton of authority. So you're truly like using your social capital, your influence, your
Hmm.
relationships with people to be able to execute something like this. Because these people that you're asking to mentor, to take time out of their workday and their families and things like that to do this for them, like there's not a lot of gain that they're personally maybe going to get. But looking at it like as an organization wide, or like, hey, this
Yeah.
person's always really shown up for me, like here's my opportunity to show up for them too.
Exactly. Like it actually it's only personal, right? There are very little tangible benefits, but it's just me feeling good, me paying someone back or paying it forward. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Good call.
All right. So effective leadership development requires smart execution. So what do organizations tend to get wrong about implementing leadership programs within their organization?
Yeah, this is gonna be the last question. So thanks, Rachel. And thanks everyone for staying on a little bit longer. There are 5 different mistakes that I see happen pretty often that are all correctable. But if you can avoid them, I think it just saves you time, energy, money, and social capital in terms of saying, I'm sorry, and making things up later. So, number one mistake that I see organizations do is they take a one size fits all to their leadership development programs, meaning that the program for individual contributors looks almost exactly like the program for people leaders, which looks almost exactly like the program for executives. Those 3 levels of people have different needs, different requirements, and the program should not look the same. So you want to make sure that it's progressive, where even if you're talking about business acumen skills in all 3 levels, like For the individual contributors, business acumen might mean, all right, make sure you can plan and project at least a month ahead. For people leaders, it might be project at least 1 or 2 quarters ahead. And for your more senior leaders, it might be you need to be able to project a year or two ahead. So you can address the same competencies, just make sure it's progressive. That's number one. Number two is organizations sometimes start at the bottom and work their way up. Like they start with what do individual contributors need before they start with what executives need, which is actually the complete wrong way to do it. You want to start from the top. What do these folks need? And then you ask yourself, all right, if my executives are doing this, if my program works perfectly, it's all going great, they're doing these things, what skills, knowledge, abilities do my people leaders need to get to that beginning level? And that helps you figure out what you should what you should deliver in this program. And then you do the same thing. All right, if these people are doing this well, what do my individual contributors need to get up to this level? And that's what you put in this program. So you want to make sure the program is progressive, but you want to start at the top and work your way down. I've already talked about this before, is the other pitfall many organizations fall into is they assume that the helpers, like the mentors or sponsors for the program, are ready to go on day one and don't need any development whatsoever. And that is almost never the case unless you're hiring professionals. So if you're not hiring professionals, if you're asking people within your organization to take on an extra duty, make sure you support them so that your program is successful. The fourth pitfall I see many organizations commit is they do too much at the start. They want to do all the things, but their program has 5 different components and they want all 5 components to start on day one. My advice is you probably want to ramp your program up, meaning you don't want to burn out or overwhelm your people resources that are running the program. You don't want to burn through all your money. You want to give yourself time to see how things are working so you can learn from your mistakes and make adjustments. So if you have a 5-part program, maybe you start a part each month for 5 months until all the program is firing on all cylinders. So ramp up your program. And then the last thing is people who create beautiful, great, amazing leadership development programs sometimes forget to pay attention to the rest of the organization. And the reason why this is so important to do is because of an anecdotal, but I think completely true and sort of ugly truth about development programs. Employees who go through development programs, in my experience, are much more likely to leave the organization in 6 to 12 months. They will feel like they're outgrowing the organization unless they see other opportunities for them. So if you're making them have a great experience for this 2 months, 6 months, a year, and then they sort of just drop back into the rest of the organization without seeing any improvement or any opportunities, they'll start looking outside of your organization for growth opportunities. So make sure that there's a place for them to grow within your organization. You probably want to even start thinking about that. Sorry, you definitely want to start thinking about that even before you launch the program. So those are the 5 types of mistakes. Not being progressive, starting bottom up instead of top down, assuming the helpers are ready on day one, not ramping up the program, and lastly, not tending to the rest of the organization.
Absolutely. And I think you brought in such a good thought about just like all the change management pieces that go
Mm.
into this and how, you know, when you're executing something new, doing it at a pace where people can be accepting of it. Because if you throw too much change at somebody, it's like, they reject it. And, just making sure you're considering the change management pieces is really important.
Yeah, awesome. So that's it, folks. I've taken up a lot of your time. I tried to just put a lot of information out there all at once. Um, Rachel, you'll stop me if I'm wrong. We're going to send the recording out to everyone who registered, as well as sort of a summary / handout of this conversation, as well as a couple of links to a few of the things that I mentioned in this conversation. Thank you all. I hope that we have earned the privilege of your time and attention. And yeah, have an awesome day.
Yeah, and you can find any playbacks for this or other past lunch and learns on our website at breakthenormleadership.com/LNL for lunch and learn. So thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.